I think you should do it.
Oh, what? No. God damn it. I kill you. All right. This is the sixth or so episode of Make Space Make Sense show, MS squared. You moms squared. What we'll have some kind of text to make that make more sense. Um, this week we are with no guests because I am a slacker and could not coordinate it properly. And it looks like we're down Albert too, because all we have in his location is a title
I've been,
screen. So
I've been
I'm not
replaced with a
sure
Magna
when he's
Doodle.
going to join us, but at some point he'll be here. So this week we're talking about the concept of illusion. We historically in liquid and digit stances at least, many people have mentioned that the dances are based on the idea of illusion. You can also look at things like mime and things like animation that are based, on the idea of illusion. But oftentimes, as 20-page reflective.net posts go, defining what illusion is and what it means and how we use it and all that stuff, and what it isn't, is a matter of opinion. So we're going to blab about our opinions or what have you. So to start off, you can start with the dictionary definition of illusion if you really want to, but to me, and let me know if you guys have thoughts on this so you can cut me off. To me, an illusion is when you have an expectation of something that's going to happen, in this instance visually, and that expectation is somehow mismatched to what actually happens. I guess that's a really broad thing, but
that's a great definition. Show's over.
that's all you really need, and then you apply that to the grid and you're done, you know.
No, it's
So,
pretty much it. Illusion is about consistency of movements long enough to create belief in an expectation, and then breaking that belief. You know, and a lot of that, it's a setup. A lot of that plays on the visual sense, and a lot of that plays on just how we perceive the natural world. You know, we believe that if we put a ball at the top of something or an object, and there's a hill, and we push it, it's going to roll down the hill, and that's how we kind of prime. That's how the senses are kind of primed already, so that we can build illusions based on the physical world, which is like things that we're going to talk about, like weight and size and stuff like that. I mean, that's already built into ourselves.
Interesting. So yeah, especially when we get into things like spatial manipulation in any kind of dance, what you're saying is, what I've heard a lot of Distortion, Scotty Miggs talk about this in the past, is really getting down and using proper physics in dance to understand how momentum works and how gravity works and how to use density in space and how to make it work in a realistic way so that you can set that expectation and then break it and then break people's minds.
Huh. It is very interesting to hear you guys talk about expectation and belief and the ability to craft illusions, right? Because I guess when I heard the question and thought about it, I don't remember. I didn't really troll through, and by troll I don't mean troll, but I didn't really read much about or look through, I guess, the reflective forms way back in the day. But basically the way I think of illusion is just there's something real and then there's something that is apparent, and the thing that is apparent is a mismatch with that which is real, and I guess you guys are taking the next step, which is like, how do you craft that? How do you build that out? And I guess it's interesting to note that belief and expectation and study of the natural order of things makes it so that you do have an arsenal through which you can sort of build illusion, right?
It takes the guesswork out of it.
What's that, Dave?
And so it takes the guesswork out of it, you know.
Right.
That's what
a reference
I think.
for
That's a big part of why I think flow arts is a great thing to study, because we're working with imaginary objects in dance when we talk about spatial manipulation, and they're working with real objects, with balls or clubs or poi or what have you. So the objects that they work with are literally bound by those physical limitations that we are trying to understand in a way that is not literally bound to reality. So if you can understand it at the level that you're forced to by a real object, then maybe you can gain some insight on taking it back to imaginary objects.
Yeah, that's sort of the idea I had, that we're not holding anything, so our objects don't have to obey gravity. But if we want an easy way to learn what, physical dialogue with an object that has to obey gravity, well, why not just pick up an object and, learn that object and let it inform your muscle memory. So then when you take the object away, you have those expectations learned inside you, and you can communicate.
So what you're talking about is taking a sock and putting it between your hands.
Yes.
But it kind of ties it into that, though. Like the idea of pushing and pulling in liquid, you have this like imaginary string maybe, or this imaginary force that connects your two hands as you pull them around space.
Or why not have a sock, right? And do it with a sock to learn,
absolutely.
Right?
I tried it. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely tried it.
And then you take that sock out to the dance floor and you make it work.
I've taped my fingertips together.
Nice.
So I'm wondering, do you guys think that building illusions off of actual physics and just the real world, whatever, does that make it accessible? Does it make it more accessible than when you're, like Albert called it, crafting illusions? It's pretty amazing term, honestly.
Something that I'll mention that Tetris brought to my attention when I showed him club manipulation last year was that he said that the clubs can be used as a training tool for tutters, and in that regard, it makes you instantly understand what these angles are and how you can put your body into these spots. Another thing that it reminded me of was a training technique that Itch had used with his students, which was to teach the box rail. He would fold his arms over and then have people literally draw over it. So you have something physical there to deal with, and it's not purely stacked on what your on how good your proprioception is, on how good your understanding of space is, because that's what we're trying to build, And if you've got nothing to begin with, then it's harder to go.
Yeah, and of course it's of course important to learn. If you're trying to connote if you're trying to connote an illusion, if you're trying to convince someone else that there is a ball here, you not only need to be able to have those physical gestures memorized, but you also need to have a very clear understanding of how you do that. I'm not being clear. You need a really clear understanding of what are all the properties of that ball, how they move in space. You need to be able to believe the illusion yourself first before you can convince anyone. And often when I'm studying mechanics or I see something that I love, I put it on my body and I know it's not ready to show anyone. Or if I show someone, it's because I'm confused and want to ask questions, but I know because I'm not convinced of the illusion. And when I'm not convinced, then I'm not having any fun with it. I'm just grinding on a mechanic or whatever.
Let's I want to just jump in and talk about that idea of maybe a ball. that you have. There's something I was reading about which is called the size versus weight illusion. I'll have a link down to the Wikipedia or what have you, but I found it interesting because when bass music hit the scene hard in EDM with dubstep, what I found was that the sounds that were coming from the music required more weight in space, and initially the way I went about that was by trying to make larger objects, trying to use larger objects in my dance. So things that were my size or larger than me would be affecting my body. Then as those things got bigger and bigger, I started to realize, like, as things generally do get bigger in the world, in theory, they usually get heavier too. And there's this illusion that I use a lot in my dance, which is based on this principle of a size versus weight illusion, and that you can have something very small, but it can weigh a lot. It can be very dense. You can have something very large, but it can weigh a little. It can be not dense at all. It can have very little density to it, and you can play with that as the music changes or what have you. Do you guys play with that at all, or does that remind you of anything you do?
Man, I was just watching a whole bunch of footage of Robert Shields yesterday because it's like bucket list. I absolutely want to meet this guy before he passes away. But I was watching old footage of him doing mime, and we're talking about illusion, and so much of what makes an illusion fascinating is when there's like complete and total contrast. Because it's cartoon-like. It's not some like average, hey, I'm holding a cup, the cup is interesting. No, it's like there's this little itty-bitty point in space and I just can't move it. Or like the balloon, the classic mime balloon where it's stuck in space. I play with it. I think I suck at it, but it's definitely something fun to play with. What do you do with it, Matt?
I had a thought, you were talking about cartoons, and that's actually a really good place to look for broken physics that you can communicate. Where the type of weird physics that sort of like break the fourth wall, like they don't apply to you until you notice them, and then all of a sudden you have this moment of communication where you're like, oh, and then it happens, I think that should definitely be played with more.
Wait, what do you mean you don't notice them until you use them?
Kind of like
run off the side of a cliff.
Yeah.
And, you have to look down first before you realize that you're
sure.
fall. Things like that. Broken physics like that, or like even weird types of walking where, like in early animation, before they had like constant lengths of bones inside the figures, a leg would stretch longer to hit a spot on the ground, then pull itself and get short. Like there wasn't a consistency in limb length, so you had this kind of a weird sort of walking that was changed the shape of the thing doing the walking as it was doing it. So we could definitely get something out of that too.
Nice.
If not just cool character walks,
So one thing that I want to touch on is the idea of, I'll always have to talk about the grid. Always got to talk about the grid because it's obsessive. And one thing that touches on illusion in my history with the grid is that at first I started working with the square rectangle type grid, and I started working with the circular grid, and they were two separate things in my mind. And you driving a bus over there, Matt? They're two separate things in my mind, and I found I had a dream about this particular motion, as I have a lot of dreams about dance motions. And I woke up and I just did one particular motion, which I'll throw out there.
Throw it.
Get it
starts
done.
here. What's
Don't
that?
fuck it up.
Who? Starts here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it just repeats over and over. And what I realized in this motion was that somehow in my head I linked this to the idea of tessellation. Matt was talking about it a lot at the time, about taking shapes and just making the same shape over and over in space side by side. And which the way I understood that was through M.C. Escher's work, which is based on a lot of illusion, and he would take these two shapes and put them together in one tile and then just tile the same shape over and over and slightly manipulate it. But so that's how, to me, illusion ends up tying into the grid, is through tessellation. At least that's one way, and that you take a shape and you tessellate it, and tessellation in itself, I think, is part of illusion. Anybody?
I'm taking notes. You're teaching a class.
You're teaching class, yeah.
Yes.
So,
I'm a little unclear. Scott, I'm a little unclear as to exactly what.
all right. So
Like, can you link those two ideas a little bit more succinctly
yeah,
to
so-
like why tessellation and illusion are?
let me do a little something first. So you have this one square, and then if you bring it up here, you have the same square, and you can do this all over your body. It's here as well.
So you're saying that like because you're repeating this visual pattern, the viewer is receiving the illusion of like the grid shape.
Right, exactly. So this ties into something I know Matt wanted to talk about, which was preserving visual information. Matt, do you want to jump in on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Before that, I was going to talk about, and this will segue into it. Having like coherent illusion versus like a noisy, wibbly wobbly, undefined sort of weird wiggle thing, chaos.
Examples.
This sort of mess that's like not really anything versus something that's
Something that's concrete. This was.
Right.
I just want to jump in real quick and say that part of the idea of illusion is that the illusion is shared by many people. It's not a one-person experience. That one-person experience is, in my experience as a dancer, that's that mess that Matt is talking about, where you understand the illusion that you're trying to give off, but the people who are looking at it are like, what is that mess going on? And it's part of your job as a designer of dance, as a designer of illusion, to help people understand what you are trying to do, and help as many people as possible. Like, look at the lowest common denominator, and if everyone understands what you're doing when they see it, like, that's a strong illusion. If only you or only one person or only a person who has the eyes of a liquid dancer or the eyes of an illusionist understands you, then it's not a very strong illusion to begin with.
Matt, how do you think misdirection plays into this? Because you used to always talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've thought about that. For me, misdirection can be about you not knowing what's happening, and you're being informed at the same time the audience is. Like, oh, this thing just started happening. Let's see what it does. Like, you're engaged in what you're doing in like a playful, creative, it looks like you're making it up sort of way. Then there are like very intentional sorts of presentations where I don't know how to. What's the contrast?
I'll jump in on that. Like, as a way to be intentional with it, perhaps like something as simple in locking as like pointing in one direction but looking in another direction. It's like that's a very simple form of misdirection. Or in Boogaloo, it would be
There's
And
something
Boogaloo
that
would be like stepping, kicking, doing a kick out to the left, but then like moving your entire body to the right. It's like you're
Right.
priming someone that you're going left, but then you're going to do the exact opposite.
Lucas used to do something where instead of looking into his flow, he would purposefully look like away from it, you know, like he doesn't know that it's moving around him. And I always thought that was an interesting thing, you know, never to like, is you can get lost looking in your own flow and you're not present to see the audience and make eye contact. And this is a way of, you know, you can be talking to someone and you don't know that it's happening necessarily. It's trying to hide from your gaze, you know. And then when you do make contact with it, you're like, oh, what is this? And then the story can generate, you know. That's a little bit of misdirection, maybe.
Like the moonwalk, the best way to, I mean, you learn the mechanics of it, and then when you're good at it, you figure out a way to direct all your energy forward while you're making those forward steps, right? So even though like you can only see my upper body, you don't know what my feet are doing, but you can kind of get a sense that I'm walking forward, right? I'm like sort of misdirecting your expectations, even though I'm obviously not moving anywhere because the camera's not. But I mean, that's sort of like a part of the magic behind all of this stuff is that that you need to. I mean, I think misdirection comes into play especially when it's mechanically difficult, right? Like a moonwalk, because it's moonwalks are crazy weird and hard, and when you learn the mechanics, you're still really bad at it because you need the ability to misdirect. You need the ability to.
Even beyond the mechanic, you're saying you need another level of misdirection. That's interesting. I like that. There's like
and
layers.
And I'm gonna bring up my like coin trick, like I always bring up.
Nice.
So this is the French drop, and basically all you do is you make the coin disappear by.
It's a good show to
Instead
do.
of actually grabbing it, you drop it before you grab it. But it's obviously here. So. Here, I was actually practicing this for this cast. Here's a bad French drop, right? And I'll show you how it's bad. Hold on here. Right? Like, obviously, I don't know if you saw my face while I was doing this.
Yeah, you're like looking at it.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and I'm like super aware of the mechanic, and therefore, like, you're not going to follow where I want you to follow it, because, but you know that's. Yeah, but with Liquid, I don't usually find that the mechanics are like crazy complicated. Usually they tend to be really transparent. So like the fold, everyone knows what's going on here. There's no mystery. There's no like, I don't know. Maybe there are mysteries that you guys.
I don't think it's a mystery because it's a strong illusion.
That actually just made me think. I have a local friend that's a magician, and one of the things that he loves to do to create wonderful magical illusions is he gets uncomfortably close, like really uncomfortably close, and he's got these like big bulging eyes, like the Young Frankenstein, the guy in Young Frankenstein. It's really close to you. He's got the bulging eyes, but all of it is to distract you. Like that's part of the illusion is that it's distracting you, and then the staring at you is so like weird and uncomfortable, but it's so intentional. You know, he wants you to look at his face because he's totally distracting from what's going on. There's a lot of sleight of hand involved, I think, in the whole process of crafting illusions. But I think ultimately it comes down to directing people's perception and controlling perception and focus and directing their beliefs over time.
And something that I want to add is that like illusions are the creator of the illusion, at least in Magic, has to know both very well. They have to know the mechanics behind the actual fact, and they also have to know the narrative that they're spinning at the same time. And I often find that myself, I like get super spun up in the illusion that I'm creating, in the perceived experience. But like this fold, you know, the fact of the matter is I have two autonomous hands, and they're not really related. And it actually takes a lot of training to do this, and it's so easy to get ingrained in that muscle memory, but when you get ingrained in that muscle memory, I think you sort of take out a certain amount of joy in the fact that you are actually creating magic, right? You're like, you're actually like building things that don't exist simply by presenting particular muscle things. And when I try to remind myself of that, it'll help. It sometimes helps me like really open things up and just acknowledge that this is actually kind of magical. And
Yeah, when you acknowledge that piece, this is something that Yejun taught me years and years ago. Was he'll say something like, all right, so you have that piece, right? And as you're doing your dance, whatever, you'll come up to that and you'll notice, you'll say, I know this is what I'm gonna do, because this is what's ingrained into my muscle memory, and I practice this over and over again, and it's to the point now where it's rote and it's not fun anymore and whatever. So you get down to that point and you make the conscious recognition, and then you stop yourself and you remember exactly what you're talking about, Albert. You remember that there's more to your dance than these rote drills that are sequenced together. And once you get that and you stop, then you're like, oh, that was just a point, so I'll push out in that direction, you know, and then I'll come down here, you know, whatever. You will once you gain consciousness of it, and you snap yourself out of that drill, snap yourself out of the muscle memory, then you free yourself to make new things. I'm not sure how that ties into illusion, but
So how do you know if the illusion you're creating is effective?
Personal story that I want to share. Dave, I think you were here for this. Was Liquid Pop Eric at one of the DEMFs one year. And Dave, you were talking to him about digits, and I was kind of a bystander because I don't really do digits, and certainly wasn't at this point. But I was like, this sounds like an interesting conversation, so I'm gonna, you know, put an ear on it. And Eric said that, and don't quote me on this, it was something along these lines. He was talking about how you know when you're doing digits right, and like how digits should be, in his opinion. And he's saying you wanna freak people out with it. You wanna scare people with it. You wanna make them think you are a very strange person. And he went as far as to pick a person in the audience, and in the audience, in you know, just a random festival goer, and he fixed his gaze on them and drew them into his dance. And he just told us both, he said, just watch their face as they watch me dance. And their face was just like, it was like they were creeped out by what he was doing. So I think that you have those audience indications, and like Matt was saying, that something Lucas does is like he will make contact with his audience instead of getting lost in his own flow. That's something that I notice people like Tetris and Pop and Todd do as well as they dance. They're constantly looking for feedback as they dance. As they dance at people, as they dance their audience, they're looking for feedback, whether it's positive or negative, and they're calculating it into the way that they dance.
Absolutely. I experience that often, and I find that my dance almost wants that before it breaks out into a heavy, like a good flow. Like before that mind state is activated, it wants to know that it's being seen. And I definitely I feel that's yeah right. But in like the subtle way that digits, you know, beckons for attention, not like, hey, look at me. But, you know, like it's like fishing.
Put gloves on.
It's like fishing. You feel a wiggle on the line, and then it starts. You know.
That's amazing. That sounds. The way you're describing it is that you have dissociated yourself from your dance.
Matt, you remember
you
telling me about dancing in the malls? You guys, like, the whole goal was to see how many people you could get before the crowd dissipated.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wait,
fun game.
Explain that? I missed that.
That's kind of just a fun aside, but yeah.
Oh. Let's do asides.
Yeah. Just tell us
Wait,
about that, Matt.
Which one were you talking about? Like back in?
That was like 07? 06? It was like 06.
Yeah, I mean isn't that what street performing is?
Wait, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah. No, never mind. It's okay. We're lost here. I'm lost.
Hey,
Wait,
Matt,
so-
can we jump
wait,
back?
I want to
onto
get back
the-
to what Matt was just saying. You were saying that your dance wants you to do something, and I think that uh, personification of dance or something, as if it's not
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
or I don't know. That's something that I feel like I don't really experience much.
Hmm.
If I do at all. But
yeah,
can you,
it's
I mean, it
possible.
seems like that has something to do with illusion, right?
Maybe.
Yeah,
There's like an
illusion-
There's this identity that is dance that isn't Matt.
Yeah,
No.
I think that's a dope illusion. Like I definitely have that with my hands during digits. Is in that the hands are two entities of their own, and they communicate with each other. But I'm not really involved in the process. Like my body myself is not involved in the process really.
Right.
And that I remember one thing somebody said about David's, about Flotsam's digits. One year at Dennis, he said they were like two spiders having sex with each other or something. And like, so they're not Dave's hands anymore. You know, they're now two spiders having sex with each other. You know, that's
Apparently.
I don't know if that was his intention with the illusion, but it's certainly something that someone saw that didn't match up with reality, obviously.
Sure. Right.
Dave, do you feel like how do you feel about your hands?
I like my digits when my hands creep me out. When I feel like I'm fighting to control my flow. Like it's really getting away from me. Like it's running places I don't really want it to go, doing things that are really not jiving with what I really want it to do. When it feels like it's out of control, like it's right on the cusp of like the whole illusion breaking, almost like a cloud. You know, like a cloud forming, and then it floats for a little while, and then it just kind of dissipates. You know, it just goes away. And really, I think that's kind of what you guys are talking about with throwing that hook out there. You know, you hook somebody for a minute, and they're watching what you're doing, and for, you know, however long, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. I mean, I remember we saw somebody. I haven't seen many people at festivals do stuff like this, but I remember one year we watched, it was like D Street. He danced for like 20, 25 minutes straight, you know, and he just hooked people into his illusion. And you just watched it build and grow and change, and just, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Who was that?
Pretty much somebody. Excuse me?
Who was that?
It was Discreet, your boyfriend in
Discreet.
Chicago. Yeah, yeah, that was when he was first really getting really good.
Random aside about Discreet, he's like in my opinion, like a prodigy dancer. He learned after his first Demph, he went up there with me and Itch, and after in 4 hours of the car ride home, he had never done digits before, and Itch was teaching him as he was driving. I was sleeping in the back seat. And after 4 hours, he was better at digits by a long shot than I was after like 4 years of doing digits. It was intense. It was awesome.
Nice. Nice.
Matt, can we jump back to we had like crazy spurned off into whatever. Is spurned even a word? I don't know. Can we go back to preserving visual information, PVI, and
Sure.
how you were talking about really bad looking illusions versus quality looking illusions?
Right. Using the grid helps. All I really have to understand this is a list of things that may help or might not. I have a hunch that these have some part of the equation, or some part of the equation.
Show us the board.
So you have your grid.
So I'm waiting.
Keeping a fixed point and constantly being aware of the fixed point, even if it's moving through the thing that's, you know, if I'm, oh, okay, I was like, what happened? So I'm in the pinky here, and then I grab, and now I'm at the wrist, and I, you know, pulling, and the contact point is shifting around during the technique and changing, but I'm constantly, that's where my awareness is. You know, it's on the point that's moving. You know, random stuff isn't happening and changing it, there's a consistency of placement, and I think that can add to keeping that information preserved. I think, did you guys freeze? Okay, no.
No, you're good.
No, you just belong our minds.
This, we're like, this reminds me of something that Shifted Shapes was talking about on one of our previous shows about the grid. Woo! Where he was talking about miming and how he was saying, like, you never take your hand off the wall, because when your hand is on the wall, you are preserving that visual information for your audience.
As soon as you take it off, where do you go? It's not there anymore.
Right. Now, to me, in my opinion, let me just jump in on that. The place where it went is your audience's imagination. So if, for instance, Matt put his hand on the wall and put his hand on the wall and took one off and took one off, in my mentality, that wall is still there. Maybe that's because I've been doing this for so long. Maybe that's because, whatever. But you end up relying on your audience's imagination at that point. And that may not be that's not the safest place to be if you're trying to build an illusion. But it's a fun place. You can try it out.
Then the question becomes, what if someone just walked in the middle of that and missed the first two placements? How often do you need to repeat that surrounding shape? How often do you need to go back to it to reestablish it for people coming in? Because, this isn't being done on stages where people are sitting from start to finish. It's in places where you can bump into someone doing it and, then start watching.
Good point. Good point. So that's we often talk about telling stories with dance, whether they're literal or whether they're just visual stories through frameworks or what have you. So that's definitely something to think about. If you're trying to tell a long story, like I'm working on making a video that may be like 30 minutes long in dancing, and someone had suggested to me, like, hey, you should make a story out of it. And I was like, Jesus, a 30-minute long story with dance, that would be freaking intense. It's like, I can't do that, like, not right now at least. But what's that?
When you guys are creating illusions, what is the actual dialogue that you hear? Like how would you verbalize this to explain it to somebody?
Maybe you should answer that yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty bad at that, to be perfectly honest.
Do you have to verbalize? Isn't the point of dance to communicate non-verbally?
True. I don't think it's necessary, but I think for the sake of teaching that there's a point to verbalization. There's a point of encapsulating something in some language so that you can pass it on.
That is what we're doing right now, though, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, how do you verbalize, what you're doing? Is there, like, what? I guess what I'm saying is, what do you tell somebody? You're telling a story. Like, how do you actually explain that story to somebody? What is the story? Like, when I first started out, I thought that storytelling was like I was going to put on a play, and it's really just not how it works. So, kind of curious how you guys work.
You can do that. I will say that, like two of my friends, Noel Yee and David Tank, they're flow artists, and they had just put out a video. I'll link to it, where it's a contact staff routine, but they break their actual motion with the staff, and they just come out and they do little monologues, and they talk to the audience, and they talk through their story, and then they just go back into their routine, and that the routine part, the physical motion of the contact staff, is all part of the story. They're not like telling a story with the staff, but the practicing of the staff, the performing of the staff, that's all a part of the story they're telling verbally. So you can certainly just like stop and talk to people, I think at least, and tell them things. Or if you're on stage, you can verbally tell them things.
There are definitely times. Oh, good.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of Flat Top. The way he'll he'll talk to the audience and set him up and be saying all this stuff that adds to what he's doing. And some of the time, it doesn't even make sense at all. But it's just entertaining, you know?
He's like speaking calculus. You're like, what? Wait, what?
Yeah, right.
Like speaking a foreign language. Okay.
I would say there are times where my dancing is stream of consciousness sort of stuff. And it works best when I'm super obsessive about something in that point in my life. I remember one of the first raves I went to, I was playing a lot of StarCraft. And so like I just, for some reason, I like got into that groove and I started like throwing down like what was a physical embodiment of StarCraft. I mean, I guess you could call it an interpretive dance if you wanted to, but it's sort of just like, here's an idea and it actually embodies physical space, and then it like rubs up against another idea which is represented by another hand or whatever, and there's maybe a wall that, and so there are these all these opposing forces, and I tend to be a kinesthetic thinker anyway, so like I don't use much verbiage in my daily life when I just do stuff. So it is very easy for me to make that transition to say, like, here is something I'm obsessing about. This particular point of interest is one component of that thing, and that's how I sort of build my narratives usually.
Now, what would a Zerglin do?
Lots of digits.
Rush!
Wow.
Oh shit! You guys talk amongst yourselves. I have to get my charger.
All right.
Yeah, I've had some. That reminds me of Itch's talk about. I think he phrased it something like the mental behind the physical or something. What's going on in your head? What story are you telling yourself? And that seems like a good example of a heavy, like being immersed in this visual metaphor where you're not thinking about which techniques you're using. You're just using what you have to represent the thing that you're seeing, you know. And I've gone through phases where I do that sort of thing, and then phases where I don't, where I'm more like a lower level technical, you know, lines and points and without meaning assigned to them, just abstraction. That's where I feel like I do the best work conceptually for me. But I've seen people who are just have that mime storytelling where, you know, this little seed is sprouting up, you know, and waving in the wind, and like all this stuff is happening, right? And it's real for them, you know.
Definitely been there before with with that exact thing. Not that exact thing, but like that idea of like growing things from places and whatnot. Yeah, that's a neat one. And that reminded me of something that was also from that conference that Itch spoke at, which was Plain White Tom talking about how like two cars chasing each other, and one of them might crash or one of them might speed up or slow down or whatnot. Like that's not a very literal illusion, but like that's how he gets his ideas across.
One car could be a UPS truck and never make left turns. You know?
That's actually not true. That is not true. Totally not true.
One car could be in Detroit.
All right. Do you guys have anything else? We're at like the 45-minute mark.
I just want to say this session was mind-blowing to me. I'm definitely going to watch it again, especially for all those times I got kicked off. But yeah, this is a lot for me to deal with, guys.
Oh my God, he's going to have a breakdown.
Yeah, I might
have
to.
I took notes the whole time.
Okay, cool. Thanks everybody for watching. It'll be out on the 1st if you're in, or in the 15th if you're in live with us, and we'll be back on the 1st as well.